The Lorimar sky burned with the hues of dawn as Gameon and his squad soared back from Seek Valley, the precious Moonlight Herb secured in their grasp. They clung to the scaly back of Milia's dragon, Thrash, its massive wings slicing through the clouds with a rhythmic thunder. Gameon's cloak billowed in the fierce wind, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the Dragon Knight's fortress awaited. Milia, steadfast at the reins, guided Thrash with a warrior's precision, the dragon's iridescent scales glinting like molten gold as they descended toward their allies. Hope rekindled for the slumbering dragons. Back within the obsidian walls of the Dragon Knight's fortress, a tense air gripped the hall where Joshua and Liukin awaited the squad's return. The towering commander, his silver hair catching the torchlight, stood with a furrowed brow. Beside him, Liukin, the aged doctor, his hands trembling with urgency as he revealed troubling news. Futch, the young Dragon Knight, had ventured alone to the floating garden of Gregminster, driven by a desperate need to steal the Black Dragon Orchid, the next ingredient for the dragon's antidote. In the ethereal floating garden of Gregminster, where crystalline flowers bloomed under a perpetual twilight, Futch moved with the stealth of a shadow. His lithe frame darted through the garden's shimmering paths, his eyes locked on the Black Dragon Orchid, its dark petals glowing faintly amidst the radiant flora. As Futch was about to pluck the flower with trembling hands, its scent sharp and intoxicating when a towering figure emerged, Emperor Barbarossa, his golden armor gleaming like the sun. Indeed, that is a Black Dragon Orchid, the Emperor said, his voice calm and composed. You're the Emperor, Futch's voice trembling as he did not expect this encounter with Barbarossa. Never thought I'd encounter a flower thief while enjoying the breeze on a sleepless night. Judging by your outfit, you must be a Dragon Knight, Barbarossa responded. Upon hearing Futch's explanation on the reason for him being here, the Emperor's stern gaze softened, and with a regal nod, he stepped aside, allowing Futch to flee with his prize. Clutching the orchid, Futch leapt onto Black, his loyal dragon, whose wings beat furiously as they ascended into the sky. But the air crackled with malice as Windy materialized, her dark robe swirling like a storm. Her hand rose, and a surge of malevolent magic erupted. A crimson blade struck Black mid-flight. The dragon roared in agony, its wings faltering as the spell's force ripped through its scales. In a brightly lit room of the Dragon Knight's fortress, Futch stirred awake on a bed, his body aching as consciousness returned. Milia stood over him, her ash-blonde braid catching the torchlight, relief softening her stern features. She recounted how he'd been found unconscious in a nearby forest, his hands clenched tightly around the Black Dragon Orchid, its dark petals unmarred. Liukin, the aged doctor, worked nearby, his hands steady as he mixed the antidote in a shimmering vial, revealing that the third ingredient was a dragon liver. Joshua, his silver hair framing a weathered face, approached with a heavy heart, his emerald eyes shadowed with sorrow as he delivered the devastating news Black, Futch's loyal dragon, had succumbed to Windy's magic after their fall. Yet, Black's sacrifice had not been in vain. Its liver had been used to complete the antidote, awakening the slumbering dragons, their distant roars now echoing through the fortress as life returned to the den. Within the grand hall of the Dragon Knight's fortress, where tapestries of ancient battles adorned the obsidian walls, the Liberation Army and the Dragon Knights sealed their alliance with a solemn pact. The air thrummed with the renewed roars of awakened dragons, their scales glinting in the den outside. Joshua, his cloak sweeping the stone floor, stood with a commanding presence, his eyes reflecting a fierce resolve as he turned to Futch. The young knight's shoulders slumped, his face pale with grief over Black's loss, but Joshua's gaze softened with understanding. By the sacred rules of the knighthood, a dragon knight who lost their dragon could no longer serve, and so Joshua entrusted Futch to Humphrey's care, binding him to the Liberation Army. Humphrey, his stoic frame unyielding, accepted the responsibility with a nod, his loyalty to the cause unwavering. Amelia, her armor gleaming, stepped forward, her ash-blonde braids swaying as she offered to ferry Gameon and his squad back to Ramyeon Castle on her dragon, Thrash. The group, united by their shared purpose, prepared to depart, the promise of new battles and stronger alliances lighting their path as they moved toward the fortress's windswept spires. The stone corridors of Ramyeon Castle buzzed with tension as Gameon and his squad returned, the echo of their boots mingling with the distant clatter of the Liberation Army's preparations. In a hall near the elevator, Kryn and Kasumi stood locked in a heated argument, their voices sharp and rapid. Kryn's wiry frame twitched with agitation, his fingers drumming on the hilt of his dagger, while Kasumi, her ninja garb sleek and dark, crossed her arms, her sharp eyes narrowing in suspicion. Outside the meeting room, Mathiu and Sanchez conferred in low tones, their expressions grave as they stood beside the stranger. Mathiu, his strategist mind ever at work, his calm demeanor belying the urgency of the moment, while Sanchez, his brow furrowed, kept a wary eye on the newcomer. The silent stranger was Taggart, a lean man with weary eyes and a tightly set jaw, his hands clasped as if bound by an unspoken oath. Mathiu had learned from Kryn and Kasumi that they'd caught Taggart skulking near the castle's perimeter, his movements suspicious enough to warrant immediate action. Taggart, it turned out, was a servant of Warren, a wealthy and respected noble from the north, a man even the Imperials held in high regard. But Warren's honor had led to his downfall. He'd been caught harboring fugitives, drawing the wrath of Kasim Hazil, whose forces sieged his mansion in a brutal assault, capturing the noble in the aftermath. The weight of the news deepened as Taggart's purpose became clear. Viktor, who had been visiting Warren, had fought valiantly by his side, only to be captured as well. Taggart, ordered to speak only to Gameon, had braved the journey to Ramyeon Castle to deliver this dire report, his loyalty to Warren driving him to seek the Liberation Army's aid. Mathiu, his mind already calculating the risks, supported the mission to rescue Warren and Viktor, recognizing the strategic value of such allies. Yet, his expression darkened with caution. The Liberation Army, still a patchwork of rebels and recruits, lacked the cohesion and training needed for such a daring operation. As Gameon prepared to rest for the day, Mathiu followed behind, his strategist's cloak sweeping the floor as he approached Gameon with a grave expression. Mathiu's presence brought a chill of urgency. He had uncovered a dire secret. A spy had infiltrated the Liberation Army. Kasumi and Krim, sent on a recon mission into Imperial territory, had returned with troubling signs that intelligence was leaking from within their ranks. Mathiu, his mind already weaving a web of countermeasures, proposed a plan to root out the traitor, requesting full control over the maneuvers for the army's training scheduled for the next day, his sharp eyes glinting with determination. Under a gray dawn, the Liberation Army marched from Ramyeon Castle, their banners fluttering as if for a routine training drill, but their true purpose burned with lethal intent, an assault on the northern checkpoint. Mathiu's ruse had worked. The spy within their ranks had fed the Imperial Army false intelligence, lulling them into a false sense of security. The checkpoint loomed ahead, its wooden barricades and watchtowers manned by unsuspecting soldiers. Griffith, the Imperial commander, stood atop the ramparts, his armor glinting as he surveyed the approaching force, his confidence unshaken by the supposed drill. But as the Liberation Army's ranks parted to reveal their drawn weapons, his eyes widened in alarm. With a swift gesture, he dispatched a runner to alert Kasim Hazil, his forces scrambling to form a defensive line, hoping to hold the checkpoint long enough for reinforcements to arrive, the clash of steel now inevitable. The northern checkpoint erupted into chaos as the Liberation Army, 15,000 strong, descended upon the Imperial forces, a mere 4,000 caught off guard by Mathiu's cunning deception. The checkpoint's wooden walls trembled under the thunder of marching boots, the air thick with the scent of pine and the metallic tang of impending bloodshed. Griffith, his face pale beneath his helmet, stood at the forefront, his soldiers scrambling into formation, their numbers dwarfed by the rebel tide. In a desperate bid to buy time, Griffith raised a white flag, his posture feigning surrender. But Mathiu, watching from the Liberation Army's vanguard, saw the glint of deceit in the commander's eyes. With a sharp gesture, Mathiu signaled the attack, and the rebels surged forward, their war cries echoing across the frostbitten ground. The battlefield became a whirlwind of clashing steel and flashing runes as the two forces collided. Kirkus, his elven grace unyielding, led a unit of archers through the fray, their bows singing as they targeted the Imperial sorcerers perched on a nearby ridge. Arrows rained down with deadly precision, cutting through the sorcerers' arcane barriers, their spells fizzling into sparks as they fell, their threat neutralized by Kirkus's swift strategy. Lepant, his sword gleaming with the fire of resolve, rallied his unit with a roar, charging headlong into the enemy archer's ranks. His blade carved a path of destruction, his soldiers following in a disciplined wave, their shields deflecting arrows as they closed the distance. The Imperial archers buckled under the relentless assault, their lines breaking as Lepant's unit pressed the advantage. Steel meeting flesh in a brutal crescendo. At the smoldering remains of the northern checkpoint, where the air still carried the acrid scent of battle, Gameon stood amidst the wreckage, his staff planted firmly in the frost-kissed ground. Before him stood Griffith, the defeated Imperial commander, his armor dented and his pride humbled, yet his eyes held a flicker of honor. Gameon extended a hand, offering a place within the Liberation Army, a chance to fight for a greater cause. Griffith, his gaze sweeping over the surrendered Imperial soldiers shivering in the cold, agreed to join, but only if their lives were spared. At Ramyeon Castle, the Liberation Army's leaders gathered around. Mathiu urged the army to march north before news of the checkpoint's fall could spread, seizing the momentum of their victory. He assigned Lepant to lead an assault on Duha Fortress and Humphrey to strike Raken Fortress, a tactical gambit to force Kasim Hazil to split his forces, weakening his defenses. He hinted at unnamed backups he had arranged, his cryptic smile betraying a deeper strategy as the squad prepared for the perilous mission, the weight of their task settling like the northern frost on their shoulders. Meanwhile, Mathiu devised a daring plan for himself. Griffith, Gameon, Kasumi, Kryn, Valaria, Flick, and Taggart to infiltrate Moravia Castle and rescue Warren and Viktor. To ensure their entry, Mathiu orchestrated a deception Griffith would pretend to have captured him, a ruse to lower the castle's guard. Before heading to Moravia, Gameon would first head to Kaleka to speak with a potential recruit. Leon Silverberg was impressed by how much the Liberation Army has grown, and he told Gameon to inform Mathiu about this. Gameon would speak with Mathiu about Leon when the chance arise. But for now, he would continue his mission at Moravia. At the towering gates of Moravia Castle, where the northern winds howled through the jagged spires, Griffith played his role with a commander's poise, his armor gleaming as he presented Mathiu as his prisoner. The strategist's hands were bound in mock chains, his head bowed in feigned defeat, while Griffith's stern demeanor convinced the castle guards of the ruse. The heavy iron gates creaked open, the guards' suspicion dulled by the sight of their former ally, allowing the pair to pass into the fortress's shadowed courtyard, the first step of their infiltration complete. Gameon led his squad, Kasumi, Kryn, Valaria, Flick, and Taggart, as they ascended toward the top of the castle, where Warren and Viktor were held captive. The climb through Moravia Castle was a gauntlet of peril, each floor a battlefield teeming with monstrous foes. Hellhounds, their fur matted with ash and eyes glowing like embers, lunged from the shadows, their snarls echoing off the stone as Gameon's staff struck with precision, the Soul Eater rune flaring with dark energy. Kasumi and Kryn darted through the fray, their daggers flashing as they flanked the beasts, while Valeria's sword cleaved through their ranks with ferocious strength. Whipmasters, their cruel lashes cracking like thunder, barred their path on the next floor, their whips leaving trails of sparks in the air. But Flick's lightning rune answered with a storm of electricity, the bolts arcing through the enemies as Taggart's arrows found their marks, her water rune glowing to heal the squad's wounds. Higher still, they faced the Magus, robed sorcerers whose arcane chants summoned torrents of fire and ice, their spells illuminating the castle's upper halls in a deadly glow. Gameon's room countered with shadowy tendrils, while the squad fought as a seamless unit, their blades and magic cutting through the magical onslaught until the final Magus fell, the path to the top clear. At last, they reached the highest tower, the window to Warren and Viktor's prison within sight, the air thick with the promise of rescue amidst the castle's cold embrace. At the pinnacle of Moravia Castle, where the icy wind howled through the window, Gameon and his squad reached the iron door of the prison cell. Inside, Viktor and Warren sat in shadowed captivity, their faces etched with exhaustion but flickering with hope as the squad burst in. Kasumi, her ninja agility unmatched, knelt before the cell door, her deft fingers working the lock with a soft click, the bar swinging open to free the captives. Warren, his noble attire tattered but his dignity intact, rose with a grateful nod, his resolve to join the rebellion ignited by Gameon's daring rescue. Viktor, his strength returning, clasped Gameon's shoulder in silent camaraderie. Kasumi's sharp eyes darted to the stairwell, her senses alert to the distant clatter of approaching guards, urging the group to flee the tower before their escape could be discovered, the castle's ominous silence pressing them onward. In the grand main hall of Moravia Castle, where banners of the Empire hung tattered amidst the flicker of dying torches, Kasim Hazil stood with an air of authority, his ornate armor gleaming as he faced Mathiu. The strategist, still playing the role of a captured prisoner, stood unbound now. Kasim, unaware of the ruse, extended an offer to rejoin the Imperial army, his tone heavy with reluctance to brand an old comrade a traitor. But the hall's tension shattered as one of Kasim's men burst in, his face pale with dread, reporting that the Liberation Army had surrounded the castle, their forces closing in like a vice. Worse still, The troops Kasim had sent to defend Duha and Rakan fortresses had been ambushed by Jowston's forces. A calculated strike orchestrated by Mathiu, who would send a letter warning Jowston of a fabricated Imperial invasion, turning the northern powers against the Empire. The castle doors swung open with a thunderous crash as Lepant and Humphrey strode into the hall, their weapons bloodied from the Imperial soldiers they defeated outside. The castle's defenses now in ruins. Gameon and his squad emerged from the shadows, Kasumi, Kryn, Valeria, Flick, and Taggart at his side, with Warren and Viktor rescued and standing tall, their presence a testament to the mission's success. Kasim's expression darkened, his forces outmaneuvered, and his castle lost, the weight of defeat settling on his shoulders. Mathiu, his strategist mask shed, stepped forward, his calm demeanor unshaken as he urged Kasim to surrender, the Liberation Army's victory undeniable. Milik Oppenheimer, a flamboyant noble clad in crimson, lent his persuasive charm to the cause, his presence softening the blow of Kasim's defeat. The Imperial commander, his resolve crumbling under the combined pressure, lowered his sword, surrendering to the inevitable. Mathiu, ever the tactician, advised the Liberation Army to retreat and return to Ramyeon Castle. Their mission complete, but the war far from over. Before returning to Ramyeon Castle, there were a couple of recruitments for Gameon to make. He would first return to the prison where Warren and Viktor were held and rescued Vincent. Vincent would then join the Liberation Army. Next, Gameon went to the northern checkpoint and met with Maximilian and his servant Sancho. Both Maximilian and Sancho would join the Liberation Army after they know that Gameon was the leader of the Liberation Army. With this marks the end of the episode. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe for more. Thanks, and see you in the next one.